Well, hello, everybody. I am recording in the gathering space of the church simply because my office is being renovated. I had mentioned that a couple weeks ago, how the foundation of the church was getting fixed, the wall, as we'd say it out here. And I was thinking through things to ramble about. And one of the things that went through my mind was just the wedding that I did over the weekend. So at this wedding, we're at the reception and there's all this music, dance music and everything else like that. And I found it just incredibly amusing where people argue about what the best era of music is and, the most fun and everything else like that. But it seemed like most of the songs were from my high school era. So it probably actually been songs from 2005 to 2015 were most of the songs, but typically it felt like most of the songs might have been actually 2003 to 2010. But all that to say, the amusing aspect of just listening to all those songs was I knew a lot of them. I knew a lot of them because of high school prom. But even more than that, I knew a lot of them just from having, ironically, listening to them at Moody whenever we would have an open house for the different dorms. So guys weren't allowed in the girls' dorm except for like twice a month for like a couple of hours. It was a specific open dorm hour, and then vice versa, girls on the guys' dorm. It might have been even less than that. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But anyhow, there are a couple of friends on the sister floor. So every dorm floor had a brother or sister floor that you were you're paired up with for the year. And it was a way to just develop friendships. So that way you knew more people at Moody. People would sarcastically joke that was supposed to be the way that you found your spouse or whatever. But anyhow, I had a couple of friends who were more up to date on music and just listening to music that way. So that was a big way I knew a lot of the songs. Obviously, they'd have been the more censored versions, but then also riding to school with different people, they would have been listening to the more current music. But anyhow, the irony of listening to that was you would think that in a wedding for today that the DJ would have played more recent songs, but nope, evidently the 2000s would have been the best era of music for parties or whatever. But the other area too, and this is just one of the saddest moments in my life, not that hyperbole exaggeration, but it was a sad moment, was in high school. So I did listen to some of these songs on my own. 95.7 and 96.3 were two hip-hop stations out of South Bend that you could hear in Sturgis, Michigan. And I remember, so 50 Cent's song Candy Shop had come out while I was in high school. And I just remember the moment that I was able to 100% understand the metaphor of that song and just the reality of then listening to music and the moment that you, one, can decipher the words being said, but two, whenever you're able to understand the allegories or analogies or metaphor or simile, depending on the music, depending on the song, it just ruined it because you were no longer able to listen to the song innocently. And it's been this really amusing thing over the last 15, 20 years. Whenever you have a conversation with someone about like, oh, they love this song, it's really fun, it's really amusing. And then you're like, do you know what that song's about? And I'm sure people have been doing this ever since time eternal. Like I know with the Beatles, there were some songs that people thought had certain interpretations. So then I think it was, didn't they write the Walrus or whatever just as a jab at an English teacher in high school who said that they could interpret the songs? But anyhow, so people have been doing this, but it kind of ruins songs when you realize they're not about anything substantial. And it was back in seminary, I worked a summer in a factory, and there was a lot of folks there were from like Guatemala, Puerto Rico, Mexico, and we were different songs, and then I asked, what is La Cucaracha about? And it's about, this a cockroach that can't walk. Well, why can't you walk? Well, you don't have any legs. So that's innocent enough. But then, you ask, well, what's the Macarena about? And it is not a song that is for weddings. But think about, you go to a wedding, you go to a prom, you go to all these different things, and the Macarena is a song that everyone sings, because it's got a dance moves that everyone can do together. And you're just like, wow, like we are literally singing this song about an affair at a wedding because you can all do the same hand motions together, and it's just sort of silly. And this is a rambling point, but mostly from the standpoint of, do we actually digest what we're listening to? But I do remember noticing at one point, college and then just beyond, but like whenever you're listening to music that only has vacuous or negative like lyrics, it really does start to pound something into your brain that isn't good. That being said, I'm not the fun hater who says you're not allowed to have dance music at a wedding. Not at all. I'm not that guy. I'm not going to say that. But I am going to say it's just very interesting, the question as to what is the line between having fun and being joy-filled versus, having stuff that's inappropriate. I think back to the different eras of my life where you could almost say I was a prude or a fundamentalist, where that accusation, and it can land however you want. But I think so much of life is this struggle to discern what is right and what is appropriate. Scripture talks about whatever is pure, whatever is holy, whatever is noble, whatever is true. Think about these things, and I think we can so often try to justify the consumption of bad content because, there's something amusing about it. Well, then we should ask questions about our sense of humor. But then I think sometimes we can want to just completely bury our head in the sand, and we can want to be very judgmental and self-righteously finger wag and go, oh, this is terrible, whenever it's like we have shared common human experiences that we can laugh about, we can talk about, we can, there's something called gallows humor, where you are able to make light of something that's dark or heavy, and that actually is a way to broach the conversation. So this is one of those ramblings that might, be boring or stupid to a lot of people, but these are the things I think about whenever I'm, sitting at a wedding and I'm trying to think about, what do I want my kids to listen to? The big question: what is age appropriate for someone? So I'm battling with, when do I have my kids watch all the Star Wars movies? They've watched episode 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. They're all 5 of those are the PG ones, but episode 3 and then episodes 7, 8, and 9 are all PG-13, as well as the Solo movie and Rogue One. Now, some people would say they're PG-13 not for things that would be inappropriate for a kid to watch, but more so it's a little frightening, so maybe a parent should be there. But like with my kids, they're scared if we watch The Incredibles. So episode 3, whenever you have Anakin Skywalker's legs chopped off, sorry for the spoiler alert right there, and he's burning in a pit of lava, you're just like, this is not something that I want my kids to watch who are going to have nightmares. I'm trying to remember which movie it was where, so in Zootopia 2, and it's a common trope in a lot of movies where someone you think is good turns out to be bad. With Incredibles 2, the screen slayer is a screen slaver is someone who's considered a good, is introduced as a good guy whenever you don't know that they're the screenslaver. And so then my middle child has this panic, this terror that what if one of her parents or grandparents is actually a bad guy? So she has this fear that comes in at night whenever like her brain settles down, and then these narratives of the movies come through of like the double crossing person, the person who's hypocritical that you think is good, and then they ultimately turn out to be a bad guy. So what is age appropriate? Because I've been seeing this meme going around of people who watched Terminator Judgment Day at 7 years old, or the person who watched Braveheart. Well, it's a historical movie, or Gladiator. Oh, it's historical, so it's fine. It doesn't matter that it's rated R. I'm going to let my kid watch it because it's historical. And so we can make fun of people for having set really strict standards, and I would never do that. But then you look back in the rearview mirror, or whenever you're actually in their shoes, and you go, "Huh, that's actually a really good idea." And so I think we need to have a lot of love and grace and compassion with others whenever they're setting a standard that we would consider to be stricter than what we would do. Because you know what? There's an aspect of love that wants to protect a child, protect our family, and maybe that's a good thing to be more conservative in those areas than less. But anyhow, I know last week I mentioned soccer, and I talked about how hard that soccer game was so I was dealing with this existential crisis of, am I a terrible soccer coach, while I'm trying to then comfort my kids who are playing this game, and all of them feel like they're terrible soccer players. So like I'm having to demonstrate what it means to be a calm and collected person who's not overwhelmed by the situation, even though I was overwhelmed by the situation, while my soccer kids were overwhelmed by how much they had lost by. So that was 2 weeks ago. On Saturday, I don't keep track of the score, but the kids were keeping track of the score, and we either lost 6-5, won 6-5, or tied 7-7. I know all three of those scores are very different, but anyhow, the kids were so excited about the game. Gracie scored a goal. I think 3 kids ended up scoring goals in the game, and it was super fun. And it's amazing just how different winning alters your perception of a good day or a bad day. And I remember talking to lots of people in the last few years about how someone can perceive a coach to be good or bad purely based on their record. And, there's so many factors that go into winning or losing. If like in high school basketball, oftentimes you either do or do not have the kids to compete in your conference. If you're a high school team that has a 6'8" kid, and then that center, and a 6'4" kid at power forward, and you have a set of twins at point guard and shooting guard who've played basketball ever since they were 4 years old, that team is set up for a whole lot more success than the team this is a really big deal in small towns where, if your school is 100 kids, you just don't have as deep of a pool to pull from. So I know I've watched some coaches be considered excellent simply because they had all-star, all-state kids, and then other coaches considered terrible, or the same coach considered great or terrible, and it's just like they didn't have the kids. So rewind back to this weekend where at, my perception of good or bad coaching, I'm just like, these kids as 6 years old or 7 years old, I think one kid's 8, their grasp of the soccer game is so different from 1 week to the next. And the presence of one kid on the team who's played a year longer is all the difference. But in it, something that completely stood out to me from like that pastoral aspect was I told the kids, like, you have to be listening. Listen to my voice, because I'm going to direct you as to where you stand on the field. So like, I'm going to be calling one kid to be moving in there, another area. I'm going to be telling the kid to kick it down the sideline, all these other aspects. And if you listen to my voice, you're not going to make some mistakes that are going to be really big deals. A couple weekends ago, the soccer game, so you have a free kick from the goal, and so, for example, the kid's standing on the left side of the goal and they're kicking it, they would kick it to the right and it would cross the goal, and these kids aren't kicking it hard enough that it can go fast, and it's usually rolling along the ground, that the other team had kids who were experienced enough that they would just run in from half field, kick the ball straight into the goal, and it was like 7 easy points that the other team would have. And so I'm saying, listen to my instructions, listen to my voice. And from a pastoral standpoint, just that ability to listen amidst all the noise, like actually keeping your ear tuned to hearing God. And like there's this song that came out when I was in high school called The Voice of Truth. So talking about all these circumstances and events, and like, the waves are crashing over me, but listen to the voice of truth. It talks about 3 or 4 different biblical stories, and like listening to the voice of truth, calling out among all things. And something that I was very proud of as a coach in high school, whenever I coached high school, was like my athletes could hear me a quarter mile away. And these elementary kids get a little scared if I, yell that loud. Some of the kids are like standing right next to me on the sideline as I'm, trying to give instructions to kids on the field. And they're like, coach, you scared me. I'm like, okay, you're standing right next to me. Like, obviously it's going to be loud. But I think we need to all learn from that experience of actually listening to a voice of truth, which I would argue would be the Holy Spirit right now, and how we can have such greater success in life. Now, that doesn't mean financial wealth. That doesn't mean all these other things. But like listening to the voice of truth matters so much. And like I dealt with a lot of feeling overwhelmed the last few weeks. Actually, I realized recently that Easter weekend and the next couple weekends after that were all just very, very, very full for me. So I never got to like rest. And so my brain was just buzzing like every day. Like thoughts overwhelming, swarming, just like I didn't breathe. And so then actually this week I tried to take a step back a little bit. You can maybe hear a little bit of I just think I didn't rest enough, and I caught a little bit of a cold, or just the seasons are changing anyhow. So you can kind of hear it in my voice. But like in all this, like, do you listen for the voice of truth, or do you let 1,000 different voices, or even 10 different voices, dictate what you should do? Now, this isn't me saying that you should only have one news source or like whatever. This isn't talking about like being informed in the world, but this is having like, do you know Jesus well enough that you can hear his voice about things? I'm not Jesus. I'm not saying that. But like, do you listen close enough to hear the voice of Jesus? Because every athlete needs to be able to hear their coach over all the noise. And the better they can hear their coach, and this is like seriously across all different sports. And I think it's so significant though, whenever you talk about, the sports that have the ball that and plays, hearing it and acting on that and being and understanding, because you'll have all these different voices calling out to you, telling you what to do. But if they're saying something contrary to the one voice you should be listening to, they're just going to be distractions that overwhelm you. But anyhow, I miss everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Super big shout out to the South Fulton track team that did really great. The girls are crushing every relay, and it's really cool to watch that. Multiple records being broken. But I will catch everybody later. I wanted to keep this under 20 minutes.